So this is Silver Creek, and Mayor Cooper came out to help us kick off our Phragmites cutting last summer. Also the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust and Natawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. And the two young ladies you can see in the front left of the picture there were unable to be with us today, but really were the kind of the community nexus, the energy that kind of started to bring all these groups together about almost 2 years ago, I guess now. And Gail Bascombe and Betty Beacon, unfortunately, they've got some family health issues and they're looking after their family members. And they couldn't be with us today, but we really did want to thank them for the energy and enthusiasm and being on the phone, pounding away, making sure things happen, but also hooking up the Natawasaga Valley Conservation Authority, Blue Mountain Watershed Trust, and Georgian Bay Forever to get at this project. So with that, I'll kick it off, Dave, and invite you up.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dave Featherstone. I'm the manager of the Watershed Monitoring Program at the Natawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. It means a lot of things. A lot of times I'm doing plan review, making sure that developments or anything that requires permitting stays out of our more sensitive areas and doing a lot of work that way. I also run or at least oversee our monitoring program. We do a lot of water quality monitoring, a little bit of terrestrial and wetland monitoring, and that includes invasive species monitoring. There's a number of issues associated with Great Lakes shorelines. A lot of them are social and economic. Today I'm going to focus on the incredible biodiversity that we have along the Natawasaga Bay shoreline. Very briefly, I'll go over what the Natawasaga Valley Conservation Authority is about. They're sending my paychecks, I better say something about them. And then I'll talk about biodiversity along the shoreline and threats. So the NVCA is about 3,600 square kilometers. It's one of the larger conservation authorities in the province. The headwaters are all the way up near Orangeville. So if you think about the water coming through the Natawasaga River and Wasaga Beach, some of that at least has started all the way up in Orangeville. It extends, the south portion includes the Oak Ridges Moraine. It goes all the way to the northeast to the Oro Moraine. Includes part of the city of Barrie and large areas of the Niagara Escarpment. So our vision and mission, try to be as innovative as we can and stay on the leading edge of science and work with our communities to do good things in the watershed. In terms of shoreline and natural heritage, we do have a regulatory role with wetlands, streams, shorelines, and floodplains. And we also provide technical advice to our municipalities with regard to natural heritage matters such as watercourses, wetlands, and forests. And we help municipalities when asked with their natural heritage system studies, basically trying to knit together natural heritage systems and get them protected on the landscape. All right, so let's get right into shoreline biodiversity. I'll focus on Wasaga Beach, but just want to note that all these systems do extend northward up into the tiny beaches areas. Similar biodiversity and processes are at work along that shoreline as well. Wasaga Beach and tiny beaches are really driven by dune processes. The Lake Huron Center for Coastal Conservation has a whole bunch of information on this if you're interested. Basically, the sands in Natawasaga Bay are static sands. There's really no significant new sources coming in, so we're kind of working with what we've been left with after the last glaciation. During high water levels, the sands are eroded and pulled back into the bay. During low water levels, those sands build up to replenish the beaches over time. I'm sure most of you have been on the beach. It can be a very hot, very dry environment, and a lot of the vegetation associated with the beach is specially adapted for those areas. Moving inland from the lake, you sort of have a swash zone where the high waters and storm events come in and push across the beach. We have four dunes where sand builds up. We have an interdune area behind that, which in Wasaga Beach is very limited due to the cottage development and housing development that's been there for many decades. And so we'll start off the hind dunes. Like I'm saying, that's a fairly rare community now. If you go into Oakview Woods and Wasaga Beach, it gives you a good sense of what the shoreline probably was like before the shoreline development occurred. There's a number of interesting species that you don't see in other parts of Simcoe County or our watershed. And that's an example of one of the few hind dune areas. And here's some species that you find. Bearberry, which is a very low shrub. Wood lily, which is a really distinctive, very showy species. Starry Fall Solomon seal, which you often see even along the roadsides where they're not mowed in Wasaga Beach, and hairy goldenrod. The foredunes are a provincially rare vegetation community, and they're basically formed as sands are trapped by the foredune species, and they accumulate over time. Very hot and dry area in the summertime. So those plants are specially adapted to that, and they're also specially adapted to be buried by sand every once in a while. Marum grass is a real key species, a keystone species, I guess you could say, that holds the beaches together. And you get different looks. This is more of a shrubby sand dune area, whereas this is a grassy, a marum grass dominated sand dune. And there's the marum grass itself overlooking the beach. You get a number of interesting species that you don't find elsewhere in this area. Beach pea, which is a beautiful showy species. We've got smooth aster, which is showy in the fall. Canada wild rye and little bluestem, which you can see through the summer, and often the dead fronds are visible all year round. A shrubby cinquefoil is a species that's found both in the dunes and the coastal wetlands here in Collingwood. Sand cherry, which in about a month from now is going to be beautiful along the dunes, and a couple of other species, wormwood and willow. A little less showy, but quite prevalent. From the dunes toward the beach, three square and Baltic rush often colonize these areas and start holding sand, especially during low water periods. Phragmites, unfortunately, also likes to colonize those habitats, so it's a real issue. Some of these marsh communities move toward a coastal marsh community similar to what we have here in Collingwood. What we found, especially with the low water periods that we had until a couple of years ago, is that between the foredune and the beach, we were actually building a new foredune. The new vegetation growing was trapping more sand. Holding that sand as a reservoir, which basically protects the beach for the next high water level period that comes. So this is a larger 3 square Baltic rush field on the beach. We get some really showy species. This is grass of Parnassus. And Scott Martin, Wendy's husband, actually took those pictures. And a few other showy species, Calms lobelia, swamp milkweed, boneset. Water hemlock isn't, it looks nice, but it's poisonous, just like the hemlock of Lower. So it's one to look out for and stay away from. And this is an example of kind of an incipient and initial dune that's forming between the foredune and the beach during the last low water period. And it's not all about the plants. We have piping plovers nesting at the beach. They've been there for almost 10 years now. It's an endangered species, and Wasaga Beach typically hosts 3 or 4 breeding pairs, which is pretty important in terms of the Great Lakes, where I think there's still less than 200 breeding pairs. And there's threats. Shoreline development along the dune systems, taking out the dunes is a threat to these communities. And Phragmites has really entered the equation. Wasaga Beach Provincial Park, starting in about 2008, started a management and control program, which has been fairly successful. Phragmites is still there along the beach, but some of the really large stands we saw 10 years ago are much smaller in extent due to that type of work. All right, and let's move along the shoreline toward Collingwood. Collingwood has globally rare coastal marsh systems. These are endemic to the Great Lakes, which means they're not found anywhere else in the world. They're associated with shallow sloping limestone shorelines. They're highly dependent on the variable water levels you get, both the long-term levels, which change over the decades, the daily levels, which can fluctuate depending on how the winds are blowing, and seasonal water levels, levels being a little bit higher in the summer and then falling toward winter. And these marshes expand and contract in response to those water levels. As David was noting, definitely with the lower water levels, we're getting a broad loss across Georgian Bay, especially in southern Georgian Bay. But here in Collingwood, we actually were seeing some of these coastal marshes expanding with the low waters, and then they contract as the waters rise up again. And these marshes, almost all of them, are part of the provincially significant Silver Creek Wetland Complex, which Blue Mountain Watershed Trust and other agencies have been looking to protect for years now. And this is this is the distribution of coastal marshes along the Collingwood shoreline. And here you can see, this is just off Hen and Chicken's Trail, and you can see the bedrock that's shallowly sloping into the bay. I'm not sure how well you can see it here. The yellow flowers in the background are Ohio goldenrod, a real classic coastal marsh species. And you can see them actually growing in the cracks in the bedrock in the foreground. This is a coastal marsh in the fall. They, in August and September, they really show their colors. Some small blue-fringed gentian and Ohio goldenrod in this picture. Remnants of these coastal marshes do extend to Wasaga Beach. This is off 70th Street, but by far the vast majority of these marshes are along the Collingwood shoreline. Lots of neat species, twig rush in the top left corner, blue-eyed grass, which is a great one to see in May in the coastal marshes, as well as Indian paintbrush, and small fringed gentian, which is a really showy species in the fall, and a number of other species. There's a lot of yellows I find in the coastal marshes. Nodding lady's tresses is a small orchid that's quite common in these habitats. And these coastal marshes, again, it's not all about the pretty flowers, but they also host a lot of wildlife function. This is Natawasaga Island, the lighthouse island off Collingwood, and it's home to all sorts of herons, egrets, seagulls, nesting terns, and cormorants as well. So a really significant area. It's an important bird area. And even right at the harbor itself, if you're there in the spring, fall, even in the winter, all sorts of waterfowl that are staging there during their migrations, or holding up for the winter if it's a mild one like the last one. And all sorts of neat wildlife. A picture of great egrets on Natawasaga Island. A spotted turtle is an endangered turtle species which inhabits the marshes, and more common species like northern leopard frog that you can see almost everywhere. And very similar to the dune systems, shoreline development is a threat to the coastal marshes. Phragmites is a real threat, and it's becoming more and more apparent. Just to note, David isn't the threat, he's the threat to the Phragmites. And I've seen him in action. If I was Phragmites, I'd be very scared. One of the interesting things with the return to average or slightly above average water levels, a lot of the stands of Phragmites that have emerged are starting to get washed away. If you walk along Wasaga Beach after a strong storm in the fall, you often see fragments of Phragmites scattered along that beach shoreline. And not all of them are going to make it, but it's a real avenue for Phragmites to spread along the shoreline and colonize new areas. And just a shot of Phragmites along the shoreline with a view out toward the lighthouse island, Natawasaga Island. And this is an example of Phragmites are really getting washed out with the return to average water levels here. So another threat. It finds all sorts of ways to get into new habitats, unfortunately. And so there's that real need to nip things in the bud here and as we move forward. And that's it. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions.